Good evening, everyone. Good evening. So my name is Eric Payne. I'm the Executive Director of the Central Valley Urban Institute, and we are one of your hosts today. I want to just kind of level set for a minute and just say thank you all for being present today as we center a really important issue around reparations. And so when I had the idea to convene this panel, one of the first people I went to was Dale, who is the dean over the library. Is she in the back? Is she here? Okay. She's working just like I am. So, again, we're just really thankful for Fresno State's partnership, and not just the university, but also the Black Faculty and Staff Association for their commitment to this conversation and to doing this work. We want to thank Dr. Thomas Ellis for his leadership. And Dr. Becton for helping us coordinate and convene this conversation. And then I would be remiss if I didn't lift up and celebrate our two student organizations who are co-host today, and that is Black Students United and also the Fresno State chapter of the NAACP. And so we'll be hearing more from some of those folks a little later. And we also are happy that they're here to table for those students that are here participating and want to learn more about opportunities to engage in this work after today. With that, really excited. We are live streaming today with our partners from CMAC. You'll be able to watch this on the CMAC station via Comcast in the coming week or so, and it'll be on repeat. So really excited about that this conversation won't be lost after today. Pivoting over to our program, we have a phenomenal, when I say phenomenal, guest with us today, and we have so many, and you'll hear about some of the amazing panelists that we have before you. But before we get into that, we saw a video of a poet that went viral earlier this month, and talking with my staff, we said, we got to figure out how to get her here. We got to figure out how to get her to Fresno. We know she probably ain't heard of Fresno, but we got to get her to Fresno. We reached out, and we were able, up into the 11th hour, to get her here. And so we are so thankful for Teresa the Songbird coming all the way from Atlanta, Georgia to be with us. She's a Grammy nominated spoken word artist. And so we're going to have her open up our program today.
This is my dance partner. He didn't introduce him. That's okay. My people are thirsty. They are waiting for water. It gets hotter and hotter, not a drop to drink inside. And my people are hungry. They need food for their bellies till each stomach is swelling. But that sounds too much like right. So tell me, who's gonna pour the water? Who's gonna serve the bread? Who will be our steward? Who will make sure we are fed? Who will be the leader for those eager to be led? To the hungry and the thirsty, give them water, give them bread. My people are thirsty. They are waiting for water. It gets hotter and hotter. I have drops for you to drink, and my people are hungry. They need food for their bellies till each stomach is swelling. If you're hungry, look to me, 'cause I will pour your water. I will serve your bread. I will be your steward. I will make sure you are fed. I will be the leader for those eager to be led, to the hungry and the thirsty. I have water, I have bread. No one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. Like no one cares how big you grow. It's about the fruit you bear, the nourishment you share, and what you choose to keep to yourself. Stock up on a shelf for rainy days that ain't coming. Can't take it to your grave. Now, baby, ain't that humbling? Parted lips speak truth. You just keep on mumbling. You know what? You keep on eating. We'll keep on hunting. You keep on sleeping. We'll keep on running. You keep giving nothing and asking for something in return. The lessons we learn, the ignorance we teach, the bridges we burn, and the levees we breach, reaching our arms for these faraway treasures, astronomically clever in our meaningless endeavors to pluck stars from the heaven, string around our necks to flaunt as pretty as pearls, when the energy of worlds has been sitting on our necks and swirling around our shoulders. Confirming to ourselves we should always know to be the truth. We are the center of the universe, the root, the constant realization of existence, the proof, the gods of creation, destruction, fornication, corruption and invasion, disruption and hesitation, ingenuity and innovation, love and celebration, one place with many nations, one organism with many faces, all facing the same inevitable end, the place where it will not matter whether you have it to borrow or to lend, to live righteous or to sin. It will end as it begins. And then what will you have been? A god of subtraction or addition? A deity of deceit or admission? Eternal energy of greed or contrition? There is no gray area with God. Gods, we must make a decision. Which end of the playing field are you defending? Because the ending is coming real fast. The ball has been tossed, and this here is the last pass before the whistle sounds. And I know you hate the feeling of your face hitting that ground. So I suggest you catch this message before you get knocked down. Because no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. Like no one cares how big you grow. It's about the fruit you bear, the nourishment you share, and what you choose to keep to yourself. We must pour the water. We must serve the bread. We must be our stewards. We must make sure we are fed. We must be the leaders for those eager to be led. To the hungry and the thirsty, I have water, I have bread. I've been hungry, I've been thirsty, needing water, needing bread. If we do not feed our people, well, soon enough, we'll all be dead.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much for that, and really setting the stage to prepare us for a dialogue around what's owed to many African American families in this country, whose ancestors, whose the shoulders we stand on, those of enslaved descendants. And so America made a promise for 40 acres and a mule, and we would like to see America fulfill its promise. So we are centering our conversation today. We have a wonderful moderator, Dr. Francine Brados Oputa. She is the owner and operator of Oputa and Associates. It's a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultancy organization. She recently retired from Fresno State University, where she served for over 15 years as the director of the Cross-Cultural and Gender Center. She also served as the director of the Campus National Coalition Building Institute team and as chair for the University President's Commission on Human Relations and Equity. Prior to those appointments, she was the coordinator of the Women's Resource Center for over 15 years. She has also taught in the Africana Studies and Women's Studies department at Fresno State. Dr. Oputa is also an accomplished performer and sought-after storyteller, motivational speaker, and organizational consultant. She is the educational coordinator of the Way Ministries, John 4:16, a non-denominational Christian ministry serving children and families in downtown Central and West Fresno. Currently, she serves on the board of Fresno Metro Ministries and Breaking the Silence. Her education includes a bachelor's degree in speech communication from Stanislaus State and a master's in mass communication from Fresno State and a doctorate in educational leadership, a joint program with the UC Davis and Fresno State. She has been married to her beloved Reverend Dr. Ifanye Chukwu H. Oputa for 44 beautiful years. They have 3 adult children. Please put your hands together and help me welcome Dr. Francine Oputa.
Thank you. First of all, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here on a Friday evening. There are many places you can be, and you chose to be here and engage in this conversation, in this work. And you took my Teresa the Songbird. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Let's give her another round of applause. It's always meaningful to me when people are talented and they move past entertaining to what a former student of mine used to call edutainment, right? Educating us with your beautiful gift. Thank you so much. Thank you. We look forward, I believe we're going to hear from you more tonight, so we'll look forward to that, won't we? Thank you, Eric, for leading the charge for this conversation tonight. Thank you to Africana Studies, our Black Faculty and Staff Association, Dean Dale Hornbuckle. There she is, Dean Hornbuckle. Let's give her a hand. Our amazing library dean, and our amazing students, the Black Students United, and the Fresno State chapter of the NAACP. When I see people I know, I like to wave at them. Hey, Marcel. So thank you all for being here today. This is a subject that has been swirling around for a long, long time, right? And it's always fascinating to look and see others get what's due to them, and then to look at folks of Black African heritage and wonder, why not us, right? And this is constantly repeats itself in our society. So we're here today to talk about reparations and what does that mean, to hear from some wonderful folks who I will introduce by their names and titles and affiliations, and give them an opportunity to tell you a little bit about themselves. And then each person to give us maybe 5 to 7 minutes of your perspective on this topic, on this issue. And then we'll have an opportunity for you all to discuss with one another as well as questions or comments that we may have from the audience. How does that sound? Sound like a good evening? Great. And for those of you who may not know, there will be refreshments afterwards outside in front of the library, I believe. In the beautiful garden that we have. So we'll direct you there. So again, welcome everyone. We're glad you're here. It's good to see folks continue to come in. Hey. You know, it's like go home. Like, hey girl, how you doing? Yeah, we are formally informal here. So let me introduce our panelists. We are expecting another panelist to join us. And again, panelists, when we get started, tell us a little bit about yourself, your connections, and then give us, a few minutes on the topic. So first of all, we have here from California State University, Fresno, Dr. James M.A. Pitts. And he is a professor here in our Department of Criminology at Fresno State. And we are delighted to have him on this campus. As they said, I retired a little over a year ago, so I still feel very connected to my colleagues here. So it has been a delight. I met Dr. Pitts when he very first came here, so very happy to have you on the panel today. We also have seated next to him Deborah Gore-Mann, who is the CEO of the Green Lining Institute out of Oakland, California. I don't know if you noticed, faces went because the Green Lining Institute has been doing amazing work for several decades. So thank you. You all have brought a lot of things to the limelight and have done a lot of meaningful work, so thank you. Also with us, and I had the opportunity to listen in on some of the task force meetings the other day, is Camila Moore, Esquire. And she is the chair of the California Task Force on Reparations. And she's out of Los Angeles. And one of the things that I keep hearing from Eric and from others is that the nation is looking at California, right, as we do leadership work around reparations. So thank you for the work that you're doing leading that task force. There are a number of amazing people in that task force. She's doing great work. Joining us soon will be Dr. Robert Mitchell. Many of us know him from here in Fresno. He is with Fresno State's Healthcare Center, and he will be joining us, we are sure, very shortly. So why don't we go in order? Dr. Pitts.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. James Pitts. I teach here at California State University in the Department of Criminology. Ultimately, been here for about 5 years. I'm just starting to get comfortable. I teach a range of issues, but mostly I focus on prisoners' rights and the correction system, focusing on prisons and jails and the atrocities associated with those institutions. I also teach a lot about ethnic and gender issues in the criminal justice system and the way in which the justice system has been very, very much focused on incarcerating blacks and the disadvantages associated with that. So as far as my perspective on reparations, I typically think of it from the standpoint of, when we talk about restorative justice, the idea of repairing the harms that have been done to certain groups. Restorative justice is a very victim-focused approach to doing justice. And the idea is that when somebody is harmed, there's some degree of restitution that is extended to those to make them whole again. And restorative justice is kind of the common term, the hot topic nowadays that everybody is putting forth in order to improve the justice system. Well, from the standpoint of reparations, what we have to consider is we as African Americans our ancestors, if you will, were for lack of a better term, incarcerated, forced into involuntary servitude, and then released one day without so much as a dollar in their name, no property to go to, nothing to call their own, so to speak. And in doing that, this put us immediately in a situation of disadvantage. And from that point on, we've been forced to kind of figure it out on our own without any, per se, help, right? Ultimately, other groups, like Japanese Americans, when they were wrongfully interned or placed in concentration camps during World War II, those individuals were able to petition for reparations and receive them. A lot of people don't know this. Interestingly, we as black people are one of the only groups that have never had that opportunity. And so when I'm teaching about this, the issue of discrimination in my classes, one of the things we see is that across the board in almost every category, black people are behind, right, in terms of income. Our socioeconomic status lags far behind that of whites, right? Income, wealth, in terms of the assets that we have, the inheritance that is passed down to other generations. Well, when you consider how the justice system looks at wealth and socioeconomic status, one of the things we say from a theoretical standpoint with crime and justice is that we tend to assume that wherever the poorest people are, that's where the most crime is. Historically speaking, we've always been the poorest people. You know, going back prior to the civil rights movement, due to housing discrimination, all of us were primarily confined to the ghetto, right? So for a long time, there's been this treatment of our people in such a way as being criminalized, right? In such a way to argue that we're not being discriminate towards you on the basis of race. It's simply that we put police in these particular communities because, well, this is where the most crime is. Well, we have a strong amount of evidence that indicates the war on drugs was fought on the backs of black people primarily, right? In fact, there's some information that came out of Los Angeles County that points out that in the early 90s, when crack cocaine was a big problem, that the federal system, the U.S. attorney, which tends to be the most punitive, in other words, they have the longest sentences, they did not charge one white person with a crime for 4 years associated with drugs. You know, so on the one hand, there's this argument that the war on drugs is not racist. Well, perhaps you say, well, why is Doc talking so much about drugs and crime? Understand the 13th Amendment basically says that if you are convicted of a crime, then you can be treated as a slave of the state. And if you are treated as a slave of the state, then your rights can be infringed upon in such a way that, you know, you are basically forced back into involuntary servitude. So what I'm trying to say is simply this. Yes, we were once slaves and then we were emancipated into another situation that is slavery by another name. And in doing so, you can perpetuate that slavery economically by ensuring that the group that you want to hold back is constantly disadvantaged over generations. And then you can also justify locking those individuals up from an economic standpoint when you use certain theories to suggest that crime is more prevalent in those communities due to poverty. I think I've said enough.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's give Dr. Pitts a hand. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Let's go right ahead.
Oh,
Margaret.
thank you. Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
Come on now, y'all. Good evening. I'm Debbie Gorman. I'm the CEO and president of the Greenlighting Institute. And we are a think tank, but we're centered on racial equity. We're going to have our 30th anniversary, so we've been centering race for 30 years now. And we are at that nexus of climate change and environmental impact and economic empowerment. So at Greenlighting, we're about the racial wealth gap. We're about closing that gap. And today, for every $1 of wealth of a white family, you have about 8 cents for a black family, and you have about 11 cents for a Latinx family. And that gap has not closed since the Civil War. So so all of the systemic items that you pointed out has perpetuated itself in an economic capitalist system. So greenlining, we advocate, we create policy, we're doing all the research, the data that supports the systemic problem we have, right? So that's racial equity. And if you look at reparations, so the distinction between racial equity and reparations, reparations is the redress of the harm that was caused. And in particular, it's an economic harm. Now, it manifests itself in criminalization, healthcare, education, but at the end of the day, it's an economic system that's meant to prosper from the black labor. And so that productivity of black labor was free at one point, but even is undervalued today, right? So the discussion of reparations for us is a discussion about racial equity. Like, if you want to close the racial wealth gap, if you ultimately want your worth, both your productivity, your mental health, your education, you have to have an acknowledgement of reparations. And we'll get to the fine doctor here who will itemize it, and they've been having meetings. We actually were honored to testify. We got in the lane of technology because broadband, right? It's almost now everything has to do with where you live, and where you live helps your economic prosperity. Quality of your school based on your zip code. Healthcare based on the job you have, right? It's all this economic connection. But the reparations part of the redress reparations isn't just the economic, it's the acknowledgement. And that's the part that I find so powerful about the task force, that you have to acknowledge the harm, to create the space, to then redress the economic value. And then the last phase is not to repeat. Right? Because we will be right here again looking at a racial wealth gap, even if and then we look up 50 years later, wait, we're back to where we are because we did not create the healing and the closure. So I think it's so powerful because right now you can even see, like, we can't even talk about critical race theory. You hurt my feelings. We're going to talk about, and that means that there's not a willingness to discuss the problem, to even identify. So the education part of the reparations task force of just acknowledging and saying there was a harm, step one. That might even be the hardest step. To say there was harm done to black folks, we exploited them for their labor, so let's redress it. If I don't acknowledge the harm, then I don't have to redress it. If I say, what do you mean? Y'all want what? No. That was, the lost cause. The master treated you well. So why do I need to give you reparations? Because there was no harm. So that first step that the task force of educating, in California, people think it was progressive, we didn't have slavery. Oh, please. Oh, please. So the whole stepping stone and the evolution that we need to go through in California is we are leading the way. I think it was Dr. Manuel Pastor at USC. He says, you want to see our country, it's California fast forwarded. Like California, we are fast forward of what the nation will follow. So this work is not trivial, right? This work is the acknowledgement of the harm, and now how do we address it, and then how do we redress it, and then how do we close it? How do I make sure? And so the reparations part, the racial equity is what we do. We're dismantling those systems. We're passing the policies that make sure that the door is in fact closed and that there's a new door open. So racial equity is that progressive work, right? Reparations is acknowledging the harm and feeling the harm so that we can now close that racial wealth gap. I was on a panel with, it was one of those, The Hill, so it was one of those political panels. And the question was phrased, well, how will we know we've made progress? And I'm like, close the racial wealth gap. When you see it go from, for every $1, it goes to 20 cents. You see it goes for every $1, it's 50 cents. When it's 50 cents and 50 cents, we will have addressed the racial wealth gap. We track that number by the Federal Reserve, by the FDIC. All of our government data tracks that wealth gap. They know that we make 8 cents or that we hold 8 cents in wealth for every dollar. There's no policy. Come on now, 150 years has been no policy? So we do the racial equity work of that policy and that systemic change, remove the barriers, change the systems, identify them, but we need the reparations work to come. Because we're constantly changing this system that doesn't acknowledge, so we're repeating the system and the healing. So let me just stop with that. We could go on, and I look forward to the conversation, but I really am so honored to be able to share the panel with both of you. For sure, we need to talk about the criminal system, no doubt. The pipeline that we've created it's a way to keep our labor and exploited productivity of the black folk. So we can talk about that, but let me pass it on to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, yes.
Well, hi, everybody. Good evening. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. I was going to say, Dr. Deborah Gorman, she was an expert witness at the California Reparations Task Force, and she did an amazing job. And it's so important to get key stakeholders in this process, like people like Ms. Deborah Gorman, who have done racial equity work for decades. And I also want to contact you, Dr. Pitts, because we have a hearing next month on criminal justice and the criminal legal system, and so I would be honored to bring you in as an expert witness as well. No problem. So a little bit about myself, and then I'll give folks like a quick informational about what AB 3121 is, what we've done so far, and what's next on the horizon. So my name's Camila Moore, and I'm a new attorney and a reparatory justice scholar. So I'm from South Central LA originally, Leimert Park area. I went to UCLA for undergrad, and I was highly involved in like Black student organizing. I was the chair of the African Student Union. Did work around like prison industrial complex and getting the UC system to divest funds from the private prison industry successfully. And I took 2 years off, did some substitute teaching, did some organizing, helping some nonprofits in like South Africa, but I was local, so I didn't go there. And then I went to Columbia for law school, and I credit that that experience, my law school experience, is kind of like a pivotal point for me where I studied reparatory justice a lot more seriously. I also studied abroad while I was at Columbia University. I went to University of Amsterdam, and I obtained a master, an LLM or a Master of Laws in international criminal law. And that required me to write a thesis, a master thesis on a topic. And so I chose global reparatory justice. It's a 50, 60-page paper of me struggling with these international criminal law concepts and arguing for reparations on the domestic level for Black Americans, but then also thinking through ways for global reparations for all Black people who have, faced harms, essentially. And so after, obtaining, my JD and my LLM from Columbia Law School and the University of Amsterdam, that was around the time of the pandemic. And so I decided to, use Clubhouse and other forms of social media to continue conversations around reparations, because a lot of people couldn't go outside. And so I was able to really build on what I've learned and teach people about reparations and the intersections of reparations and international law. And I credit that experience of building my confidence to apply to this a historic California reparations task force. Governor Gavin Newsom signed AB 3121 into law September 2020. And the bill was actually authored by then Assemblymember Shirley Weber, but she's now the Secretary of State. And so the official title for the Reparations Task Force is the California Reparations Task Force to study and develop reparations proposals for African Americans with a special consideration for African Americans who are descendants of persons enslaved in the United States. And so, like I said, Governor Gavin Newsom signed the bill into law in September 2020. And between September 2020 and June 2021, there was a process of people being interviewed and selected by the governor, who had 5 appointments, by the Speaker of the California Assembly, Anthony Rendon, who had 2 appointments, and I was appointed by Speaker Rendon. And then the Speaker of the State Senate, Tony Atkins, also had two appointees. And so by June 2021 of this past year, all 9 members of the task force were selected and appointed, and we had our first meeting. So that brings me to what have we done thus far, right? So since we've met, since June 2021, we've had a series of official virtual public hearings for the edification of the public, right, on, chronologically speaking, starting from the transatlantic slave trade and the institution of slavery, and then the impetus and implications of the Great Migration. And for each of these hearings, the format is that we bring people to provide expert testimony and personal testimony on the particular issues and topics that we're focusing on that particular hearing. So for instance, with our first hearing on the transatlantic slave trade, the institution of slavery, and the impetus and implications of the Great Migration, we brought people in like the author Isabel Wilkerson, who wrote Caste and Warmth of the Other Suns, right? Warmth of the Other Suns is an anthology where she's detailing our elders who went through the Great Migration and their experiences and what propelled them to move from the South. In some instances, it was fleeing from racial terror, being that we were internal refugees, given that most of us have folks, have lineage from the Deep South, right? Myself, Mississippi, Alabama, Texas, and Louisiana, but and so just moving forward, after that hearing on the institution of slavery and the transatlantic slave trade and the Great Migration, we held hearings on more contemporary harms against Black Americans, like racism in banking, tax and labor, and housing segregation and education segregation. We invited someone named Paul Austin to provide personal testimony. Him and his wife, Tanisha Austin, went viral recently in the past year. I don't know if you all heard their story, but they're a newlywed couple, bought a home in the Bay Area, and their home was appraised for $500,000 more when they enlisted their white friend to kind of change the environment of the house to make it look like it wasn't a Black person's owned house. And through that change in the environment, the appraiser appraised the house for more than $500,000 more, right? Given the race change, and so he came to give his experience and his testimony. And one thing that I thought was very enlightening is he said, you know, my dad moved from the South to the Bay Area and also, you know, attempted to own a home, did own a home. A white realtor had to sell him the home in secret because at that time, right, there was high racial tensions. So not only did the white realtor have to sell the home in secret, but he also had to build the house on weekends and at nighttime. Because if he was seen in the daytime, you know, building and constructing that house, who knows what would have happened. And so that's the type of thing, the acknowledgement that Ms. Deborah Gorman was speaking to in terms of this California Reparations Task Force and the potential for it to be a very cathartic process for Black Americans who descend from chattel slavery or who have been impacted by racial discrimination and systemic discrimination in this country. And then just to summarize again, you know, after that hearing, we've held hearings on gentrification, infrastructure, homelessness, sports, arts, and culture. Erica Alexander from Living Single, or Maxine, Maxine Shaw. Yeah. She was a witness at that hearing. And this past January, we focused on technology and health, stemming from physical health, mental health, and public health. And Ms. Deborah Gorman was a witness for the technology panel. And then we just wrapped up our February hearing literally 2 days ago, well, yesterday and the day before, and it was really a celebration. So we invited people to speak to the history of reparations advocacy in the United States. So people brought up the names of Callie House, who was born into slavery in Tennessee, and she was credited to be the first organizer of an ex-slave mutual relief and pension bounty association, organizing newly emancipated slaves with the little change in pennies that they had to provide mutual relief to bury the dead and help the sick, while simultaneously organizing them to fight for reparations or pensions. Unfortunately, the United States charged her with mail fraud for those efforts and incarcerated her for over a year. And then after she was released from prison, her organization was pretty much dismantled, and she died of cervical cancer soon after. And so we have people like Callie House, as I mentioned, who have fought for us literally since we were emancipated. People like Queen Mother Moore, Reparations Ray Jenkins, John Conyers, who was the author of HR 40. So these past 2 days at our virtual public hearing was really a space to honor those who came before us, and to honor the people who are currently doing the work for reparations. And just to summarize, finally, where we're going now. Next month, we have potentially, it will be a historic vote on the question of who should be eligible for reparations in the form of compensation in the state. So that details questions around lineage, race, residency. There's a lot of complex questions that go into that. And then again, we're going to have a hearing on the criminal justice system in April. We're hosting a hearing on the education system. And also the last thing, we're also launching a 2-part report. And so the first report is going to be released in June of of this year. And it's going to detail pretty much everything that we have studied thus far in terms of the harms and in terms of the evidence that will justify the ample reparations proposals that the task force will develop. So that is coming out in June of this year. And then the second part of the report, which will be released in June of 2023, which is the end of the task force. We only have 2 years to do all of this work. That second report will consist of the major proposals that we will then turn to the California legislature for them to turn into bills and then into law. So it's a lot on our plate, and thank y'all for listening, and I'm happy to continue the conversation.
Thank you all so much. Wasn't that rich? And we're just beginning the conversations. We're just beginning. Thank you all so much. It was amazing listening to what you all had to say, and I'm sure there are many of us who could relate to the stories, to our family's history. I was at Stanislaus State, where I finished my undergraduate work, and I was in a history class, and they were talking about the Great Depression, and I was like, wait, my daddy was a young man. So I went and I interviewed him, and one of the things he talked about was why he moved to California. And there's a long story I can tell. I actually did a Fresno Bee commentary on this in 2020. And he said he left the South because he knew he could not reach his full potential as a man if he stayed in the South. And that's why he moved to California. So the great migration stories, I'm sure there are stories all up in this room. And my father was right about that, in that when he passed away, they named an elementary school after him in the San Fernando Valley, Broadus Elementary School. So it's amazing to hear these connections. I was writing down all these connections as you all were talking. Thank you. Is there anything that any of you want to discuss with one another based on what you were hearing? I love the connection, Dr. Moore, with Dr. Pitts, and like, all right, we need you. We need to come and hear from you. I love that connection. Is there anything that came up for any of you, first of all, that you want to discuss with one another? Let me give a moment for that. And while they're thinking about that, you all think about your questions. What are the questions that you have for them? What do you want to know? What do you want to know more about? What are you interested about in this topic? I have some questions here, but I'm going to give you all an opportunity first.
Well, can I just take the time to just mention one thing? When I noticed, or I talked about my international law experience, but I forgot to say what reparations is under international law, in case folks want to learn, and it could help guide the discussion.
Excellent.
So a lot of people think that reparations is just a check or compensation, and that's a very important piece, like, right? 40 acres and a mule, like, we need our money, our compensation. But under international law, reparations comes in 5 forms, and compensation is just one of those forms. So there's also restitution, which accounts for stolen land, and we can look to like the Bruce Beach example as an example of that. Restitution also accounts for stolen intellectual property, right? And we know that a lot of Black people have invented things or have been ripped off of their innovations in the music industry and in the entertainment industry, right? So there's compensation, restitution, and there's rehabilitation as a third form, and that can deal with, like, you know, mental health services and legal and social services. And then there's satisfaction, which are the more symbolic measures of reparations, whether that's like the changing of street names or buildings and things like that, or the taking down of Confederate statues and erecting something totally different that honors our ancestors. And then lastly, Ms. Deborah Gorman already mentioned, and Dr. Pitts, is guarantees of non-repetition. What are the ways in which the state or the wrongdoer party can guarantee to stop harming the party that they have harmed historically? And so that does get into discussions around, you know, on the tame side, prison reform, but on the more radical, imaginative side, that can get into conversations of abolition, right? So yeah, that's it.
Excellent. Thank you.
I love everything you see, well, both of you have had to say. I think I could talk to each of you for hours on the matter, but where I'm struggling, primarily as an educator, is there's a failure to acknowledge all of this, and that, for me, that is step one, okay? If it's not acknowledged, it dismisses or discounts the reason for all of the rest of it. And so one of the conversations I really need more insight about is how might we organize or convince others to acknowledge the harm that has been done, and even worse than that, or perhaps more difficult, the extent of that harm, right? Because it's one thing to say, okay, well, your family or your ancestors were mistreated, and oh, we'll cry you a river about that, but there's only so much we can do, because a lot of times what they say is that wasn't us. The major point I try to make for people is that if we look at the ramifications of that long term, it extends to contemporary times, right? It is still affecting us today. I mean, one of the things I look at even with my parents is that they mentally seem to be stuck in the civil rights movement. They were still fighting that fight. They didn't feel like anything had changed. And as I've gotten older, one of the things I've struggled with is, if things have changed, why is it that there's this failure to acknowledge how bad things are and the extent to which, for instance, minorities are mistreated across the board, whether it's socioeconomics, whether it's the criminal justice system. I just finished the paper on police brutality, right? And you should hear the opposition to the idea that, you know, that's a sign of discrimination, right? When we have ample evidence in every category that we're disadvantaged in all of these ways. And so for me, the tough part is, one, getting people to acknowledge it. But in order to do that, you got to get them to talk about it. I teach a class of about 50 students, and they're afraid to speak on the matter. And it forced me to take a little time and consider why that might be. And I realized that as a non-tenured professor, I'm a little scared to talk about it, right? They could walk in the classroom and fire me at any time, you know, say, sir, we don't know why you're teaching that, but that's not right. We see the same thing going on with people teaching criminal race theory, right? The issue of trying to say, well, there's no utility to teaching criminal race theory. You ask about issues like affirmative action, right? Or whether or not certain methods that have been used to kind of deal with the discrimination that has happened in the past, whether or not we still need that. Things like issues with the Voting Rights Act, okay? They're trying to repeal that, right? The problem is, it's always a constant attempt to move away from the little bits and pieces that have been acknowledged so that they can, so to speak, forget about what's happened. They don't want it in the history books. They want any sign of it that there was ever an acknowledgement of the wrongdoing. And the toughest part for me, while I share all of your sentiments, especially with regards to the legal system, the toughest part is, will they ever acknowledge it?
Okay. We have to speak our past. They're not going to speak our past. In fact, there's an erasure of our past. And I don't care if the saying is, those who hold the past create the present and the future. So it's designed to erase our past. So we got to speak our past, and we got to hold on to that, because that is how we articulate our role, our contribution. And that ability to understand all the things, that the hardships and the trials and tribulations, but the honest and brutal truth is how we preserve and have the conversation, right? It's the denial of that past that allows me to move so swiftly through it. But if I have to sit with that, and I have to hear your family's pain, and I have to hear the stories that we want to forget too, like that's a lot of pain that we carry, then we can deal with it. It's just like any dysfunction in your family. If, you know, I'm from an alcoholic parent, and it wasn't until we could talk about it that we could understand it. But while we weren't talking about it, it just, the dysfunction and the pain just perpetuated itself. Look, you got that. I'm loving all that.
She's fine, Dr. Pitts.
So I think it's understanding and holding on, speaking to the past, which is why there's such an effort to not speak about the past.
Right.
There is so much energy right now to not talk about slavery, to not talk about the jailing of black folks, to not talk about the comorbidity of black women. It's just, it is so fragile, and it's so key that they're like, ooh, maybe we can get them to not talk about it. They're gonna forget their history. And so I think it's that articulation of our past that will allow us then to reform or to either articulate a different understanding of where we are. And then, you know, of course, we just have to keep on keeping on as a people. It's just what we do. I don't know when people are like, well, how do you have hope? I'm like, oh my goodness, how do we not have hope? That's in who we are and what we have done through all the pain that we just get back up. And so they're gonna keep backlash. You know, I would be interested if y'all on the committee, if you've had death threats, what kind of backlash you're feeling as you start to complete this work. As we start to report and explain what's going on. I mean, the threats are going to get, in California. So I just know so in all the work that we've done is that when we are grounded in that history and that understanding of what we've gone through, it's pretty hard for the people to sit across the table and deny that. And so then once you start like, yeah, y'all kind of did go through that. Now we're starting to talk about, okay, then how can we otherwise change a system? And I think the work of the reparations and the task force, like we do think of it, 40 acres and a mule. You can have education. We can have people of color have free tuition. It's called the VA program right now. The government is underwriting those programs, so it's not like we haven't had those programs. You can have baby bonds, which is when you're little, we're going to put $15,000 in an account, and by the time she's 18, she's got some real money, right? We've got all kinds of ways to allow you to have home ownership that is deeded to you. Not some down payment program where the bank is still going to charge you more interest rate, a higher fee, right? That you have actually a home that is your family owns as a way of reparations. It's like you have to really open up your mind on what reparations can be. Like what are those things that free health care? Oh, I get free health care, remember? That's my I get under, you're like, yep. Oh yeah, we passed that law. Come get your mammogram. Like, you really think about what are those things that would free me, or would free my community, that can be healing and reparation. And I do think that all the symbolic things have to happen. Just name some bridges, name some thoroughfares. We all have Martin Luther King Drive.
Yeah, yeah.
But we need those names and the Callie houses who she sued the federal government in like 1870 something. Come on, girlfriend was way ahead of her time. She said, I'm suing y'all for reparations. Y'all stole our labor. I was like, and we can't talk about it in 2022? And she was talking about it in 1890 something, 1870 something. Right, so that work has been done, and it's our turn up. They're giving you the baton. You got to take the baton, and we're gonna then do the work. And then we're gonna put on the ballot. We're gonna do all the things that we need to do, and then we'll see, really what we're made of, because then that's every vote counts.
Thank you. Dr. Moore, did you want to comment on any of that before I open it up to the audience?
Yeah, I'll just hint on the radical imagination piece. I think is super important. I think this is a special and unique opportunity for us to use our imaginations to decide for ourselves, what does reparations look like for ourselves? What are the needs that we see in our individual lives and communally that can be filled by, reparatory and transformative justice. To the other piece around Dr. Pitt's point, yes. So I want to say I acknowledge and celebrate Governor Gavin Newsom for signing this bill into law. Like, that is a huge step. Like, it is official law. But to your point, there are just everyday citizens that are challenging what we're doing, who refuse to acknowledge, who are always on my social media asking, why are we having a task force? California was admitted to the Union as a free state. And then, I have to say, well, I don't directly respond, but, through our hearings, it's all documented that while California was admitted to the free state as a free state in 1850, Just 2 short years later, in 1852, the state implemented a Fugitive Slave Act. So during the gold rush, you had a lot of white slave owners bringing their enslaved people, black people, to California to mine gold for the owner, right? And so there were even situations like Robert Perkins and 2 other black men, for example, who were brought from the South as slaves to California to mine for gold for their slave owner, escaped.
I'm sorry.
And these 3 men escaped and then were able to do their own gold mining enterprise. They were very successful for a certain amount of time, accumulated a lot of money in today's dollars. But when that 1852 Fugitive Slave Act was enacted, they got rounded up and shipped back to Mississippi to be slaves. They were never able to benefit from their gold mining enterprise long term. And so the part of the work, the hard work, is, you know, making sure that we're educating the public, and you know, when there is backlash from folks, and I'm not going to say the color because it's diverse. There's detractors no matter what color you are. When there are detractors, it's up to, you know, reparations advocates to educate. And I just wanted to leave it there.
Thank you. Thank you all for those great insights. You know, I really appreciate the conversation about erasure. And I mentioned that about my dad, and that was 30 years ago when the school was named after him. And there was a movement recently to rename the school.
We were talking about this, and they felt like with all of the backlash and the stalwarting and, you know, the blocks, and like you guys said, the naysayers, and internally as we were talking with our other friends, they were saying, well, why can't you guys just get over it? It's been so many years ago, just get over it. And I know you all have heard, this is nothing new, I'm preaching to the choir, but you know, my grandmother will be 100 years old in April. And we talk about this all the time. And you know, I believe hope is essential. I don't think my grandmother has hope anymore that this will be realized. Her father was a sharecropper. Her grandparents were slaves in New Orleans. And, you know, trying to keep hope alive, but really, how do we operationalize it so we start experiencing reparations now? And then there was a conversation, do we need to say the words reparation? Maybe we need to title it something else, which I don't agree with, but I'm sure you guys have heard that as well. But just wanted to know your thoughts about, do you feel like we're going to experience it in your lifetime? And, you know, thoughts about possibly changing the name from reparations to something else.
The African American Historical and Cultural Museum is the brainchild of her family also. So we want to give the Kelly family their props right here and right now. Yes. Police officer, yes. Yes. Rich family history in the room. Yeah, needs to be known and acknowledged. Yes, let's hear from our panelists. She brought a lot of things to the forefront here.
Will we see it in our lifetime? I've learned to be careful for that. While I am hopeful, much like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., while I am hopeful, I do share a similar sentiment that it don't, you know, looking at the road ahead, it doesn't feel like it will happen in our lifetime. I've learned to be careful for that because I said the same thing about a black president happening in my lifetime. And so I know my dad was, you know, he was a very big supporter of Reverend Jesse Jackson when he ran in the 80s and was heartbroken when it didn't happen. And I think he kind of came away from that situation, you know, kind of feeling discouraged. So I've learned to be careful, you know, to say, well, it won't happen. On the one hand, I don't know how long I'm gonna live. And secondly, if you're not hopeful, well, then it probably won't happen. So in that regard, I've learned to be careful, but I don't know. There are a lot of things that we certainly have to do to push that envelope forward. Going back to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., keep in mind, he shifted the movement toward economic equality. And what I see among us nowadays is we're not willing, at least in my opinion, we're not collectively willing to tap into our economic influence such that we can move the market. We continue to buy their products, even though we don't continue to see any equity or equality. Case in point, you may be familiar with, for instance, the quarterback Colin Kaepernick, who experienced some frustration with the NFL. But we continue to watch the NFL. We continue to support all of these things that pour money into that system. Keep in mind, the Birmingham bus boycott did not work because they just one day decided to give us equality to sit at the front of the bus. It was an economic struggle for them losing money. So long as we're not willing to collectively pull together and utilize our economic influence, I do worry that we may never see it because all of our leaders keep getting pushed aside or murdered, right? Or martyred in other ways, like Colin Kaepernick, who took an opportunity to peacefully protest something that was a very big problem and was blackballed for it, right? Even though he did it the right way. So even when we do it the right way, we receive a lot of criticism. And the truth is, a lot of times we're not taught the full history, for instance, about the Birmingham bus boycott and the harassment those individuals received in trying to push forward a new system of getting themselves from point A to point B, being followed by the police, being pulled over and harassed by the police just because they decided not to ride the bus and participate in an unjust system, right? We've even been cut off from our history. So the importance of reparations is there. The importance of pushing the narrative forward is there. We must find ways to remain hopeful, even if, like Dr. King said, I may not get to the mountaintop with you, but mine eyes have seen the glory. So we must remain hopeful. Again, we don't know when it'll come. Barack Obama, our former president, came out of the blue for me. I didn't see it coming.
Thank you.
So it may happen a lot sooner than I expect.
Thank you. Would either of you like to address that?
Yeah, I was actually going to say something similar. I was just going to say, do we want to see it happen in our lifetimes? Do we want to make it happen for our elders? It depends on how bad we want it. I understand that white supremacy is real, but for instance, the California Reparations Task Force, I already credited Governor Gavin Newsom for signing the law. But who did the work to make that a reality? It was unnamed, unsung heroes like Tiffany Crowell, Friday Jones, Chad Brown, Marcus Champion. These are everyday Black Americans with full-time jobs who came together to make this California Reparations Task Force a reality, right? But California is just one state, right? There's harms on a municipal and city level, and obviously, of course, the federal government owes the debt, right? The federal government should be on the hook, right? First and foremost before any state, right? This is kind of backwards. California should not be first. The federal government should be first. And so, it's up to us to collectively come together and push for the repair we need. And I'll say that, and that's historically proven, right? Anything that the Black American community has demanded, we've gotten. Maybe we haven't always been in control over the timing of when we got it, but we everything that we've collectively organized, we have gotten, right? We freed ourselves from slavery. A lot of people say, oh, the white man freed us from slavery. No, we made the system of chattel slavery in this country so untenable through revolts, through little forms of resistance on the plantation, to the Underground Railroad. We freed ourselves. In the Civil War, we freed ourselves, right? We took down Jim Crow apartheid. That was us, right? And so when it comes to reparations, that's going to be up to us as well.
Thank you.
Can I say?
Yes, and I see other questions.
Oh, excellent. Okay, so there's a saying, and I don't oftentimes quote Lenin, but he said, there are decades when nothing happens, and then there are weeks when decades happen. And so the breakthroughs come in accelerated fashion. This city of Evanston, they did their own form of reparations. So I'm actually on the other end of where you are, Camila, that it's all the little local movements that add up to force a federal movement. So the example I'll give you is gay marriage. People, I'm sorry, this country was like, we don't acknowledge gays, it's an abomination. And then one city says, we believe they have equal rights, gay marriage in that city. Gay marriage in that city, another state in that city, another state in that city. And it was like, okay, we're gonna pass a federal, well, certain states then started passing laws, and then the federal government said gay marriage, and everybody else was like, we've been had that. So I would say the federal follows the local, that in fact it's hyper local. Like you can just do your neighborhood, you can do your city and then your county and take care of yourselves. And that's why Evanston, they're like, we're doing reparations. We're not gonna wait for the country, we're not gonna wait for the federal government. We're gonna do our history and we're gonna do reparations. So that's why it's so important that California, there are going to be parts of California, we all know which counties, we all know which cities, who are not going to be doing reparations. But there might, like San Francisco, Oakland, Oakland, we're pretty progressive. We were talking defund the police 10 years ago. Black Lives Matter. And then the country got still during the pandemic, like literally got still, and we saw George Floyd. That was a couple of weeks where decades happened. We all knew people were getting, driving while black, arrested. And then that moment, and then the backlash came, make no mistake. It was like, okay, y'all are lunging forward. We see it too, shock and awe. And it was like, we got to do something. I would argue that criminal justice has moved fast in decades. We were never talking about cash bail. Communities were talking about it. We had this opening. It's not fitting the capitalist system, but they are actually revisiting criminal justice because it's just us. So we're revisiting that. That's a lunge forward. And so I do think, I don't know when those weeks will happen where it's going to lunge forward, but I do think the small pockets of work are going to add up, and that momentum then the federal side, the federal government or whatever, where we have the right administration in place. So the other little policy things that we're doing, and then we'll pass the mic. The Justice 40, so Justice 40 says 40% of every public dollar is going to be spent on low income and disadvantaged communities, which is the majority us. 40% of every dollar. We took our cap and trade money in California, and those funds, 40% of those go to the most impacted, right? Those who are most impacted by admissions are going to benefit first. That's a policy in place that they're kind of watching. Like, is it working? It's San Joaquin Valley. A lot of that work is being done place by place, and because they're seeing that work, they're doing it in other communities. So I kind of, I don't know when the acceleration happens, but it happens. That's the acceleration, the breakthrough we saw with Obama. There was a moment, the country wasn't really ready for it, but we lunged forward, and now we're in the backlash of it.
So we have.
Was the country not ready for it? Even some of our leaders weren't ready. He said, no, it's not your time yet. He said, forget you, and went forward anyway. That's right.
Yeah.
Allison, I know you have a question, we're only going to take, Eric have one more question, but I'd like to give an opportunity if any of our students have questions. I would like to give an opportunity for that. So Allison, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was going to say you can give it to the student if you want.
Thank you, Allison.
Yes.
Any of our students have a question?
Yeah, have them go first.
Why do we identify ourselves? Let me think. You know, you can ask your question. We'll have a question after.
So cute. They're so cute. Thank you so much for this. This is really encouraging and inspirational. Excuse me, panel. I know you guys are talking. I have a question. I'm just kidding. Thank you. When you talk about how will this happen or will it happen, and can we get others to acknowledge the harms that have been done? Is there a way, you talked about international repertory pieces. How do we build empathy like they built for gay marriage, like they built for universal basic income? How do we build empathy so that it isn't just us fighting for this wrong that needs to be righted? And is there a way to use the international story to help apply pressure and move this piece? And then secondly, well, let me have you answer that one first, and then I'll see.
Can you elaborate on the international?
He mentioned that Japanese were interned here in this country, and they were paid reparations. The Jewish community was paid reparations by Germany. They took down, they don't have monuments to Adolf Hitler. You don't go to the concentration camps and visit like they do here, plantations, and they kind of whitewash it. So are you using the international story to impact the understanding of reparations in this country? Because a lot of people that I've talked to, white friends that I have, they feel like it's a zero-sum game, that they're going to lose something if we get reparations. And I'm trying to explain and understand, I don't think it's that way. I think it's the government that pays. But so back to the question, is the international piece relevant? And is the understanding of reparations clear enough so that it's not a loss on white America if our community is repaired?
Yes, that's a great question. The international piece is extremely important. And in fact, the international piece is baked into AB 3121 as a law. So the 9-member task force is required for our proposals, whatever reparations proposals we come up with, they have to comport to international human rights law standards. And so, like I said, the first report, we were just documenting the harms. The second report, we're going to delve deep into international law. And at our upcoming hearings, bring in experts from, international law fields, human rights fields, the United Nations, the UN Human Rights Commissioner actually spoke out about how worldwide, this is a decade for people of African descent, and all states need to repair and give reparations to their Black population. So that has been decreed on the international level. And as this task force accelerates and ramps up, we're definitely going to bring in those conversations around international law. There was another piece, but I'm so sorry. I forgot.
That it's not something that's been taken from white America.
Oh, yes.
The understanding is the federal government's role to remunerate
Right.
the harm. It's not there. It's not against it. It's not a zero-sum game.
Yes, so I personally support federal reparations efforts, but I'm just kind of swamped in the state stuff. But what we've been doing to kind of address that is, we're working with multicultural organizations. We're working with civil liberties and civil rights organizations who have a lot of, white folks in them, where we're helping to create podcasts and other educational tools and articles and things like that in different forms of media to just help educate. Because this whole process, it's about the reparations proposals, but it's also about the education. And it's not only educating Black folks, it's educating the entire California public. So thank you. Oh, I'll just say one last thing. The only thing that I want to say is that we're also in the process of organizing community listening sessions. So Member Grills, who's one of the task force members, she's been the one who's been leading the campaign around organizing and enlisting anchor organizations, which will then host community listening sessions throughout the state of California. And these anchor orgs represent, faith-based communities, social justice, to different types of areas that they represent. And the whole idea is that in addition to these virtual public hearings, formal hearings that we're doing on this process until the end of the task force in 2023, we're also enlisting anchor orgs who are doing real work in their communities from Northern California, Central California, Southern California, where task force members will attend those listening sessions and hear from the community directly about what their needs are and about their thoughts about reparations.
Get additional information. You talked about being on Clubhouse and social media. And then my other question is, the task force meetings, are they available for people to go back and watch?
Yes. Yes, so our website is hosted through the California Department of Justice. So it's oag.ca.gov/AB3121. And when you're there, there's a tab for past meetings. It'll take you to the DOJ's YouTube page, and there's a playlist dedicated to the reparations hearings that we've been having since June of 2021. And if you go back to the website, oag.ca.gov/AB3121, there's also a tab for you to subscribe to our mailing list so that you can get updates for when we meet next. And then also, if you just want personal updates from me on the process, I tweet articles and I engage with the public all the time through my Twitter account, Camila V. Moore. Thank you.
Tess.
So I know you guys are talking about the importance of like doing things on a local level, and for me personally, like that's something that I'm really interested in. And I think like what the struggle is like engaging students to think that they can be a part of this on a local level, because it's like, especially in Fresno, we deal with like a lot of poverty and stuff. It's hard for people to look past what they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis and understand that if we can get together, we can make changes. So my question is like, how do you see like organizing efforts on a local community to get the community to be involved?
So local organizing is very much a challenge, but what we do know is it doesn't take a lot of folks. It's never a majority of folks, right? So if you can just, and it's not just, if you can bring together just a core group, it doesn't have to be a big number, or core group to talk to your elected officials, I mean like your Board of Supervisors, City Council, like really, really local, you'd be amazed at how strong your voice is. It's actually, the system relies on you not talking. It needs us to be complacent. So like all of the big movements, there were very few people who actually made those things happen. They got a lot, they got a lot of publicity, but it really was a small minority core group of folks. So don't think of it as you having to get, 100, 200 people. It could be 10 or 15 of y'all who go sit in and demand a meeting with the mayor, or go to a city council, get something on the agenda and speak publicly on a mic and say, this is what we're demanding of you. Because that's petrifying for an elected who needs to understand the impact of that voice. So whatever you can do, just do that. However small, don't feel like it's too trivial. And y'all are great on social media. Y'all can create some momentum. Like you really are effective at that. And I think you should use all the resources you can.
Let's give our panelists another round of applause. Extremely educational, and yes, our students here at Fresno State are amazing. We are all still talking about, and will forever be talking about, in 2020, our students led the largest demonstration in Fresno's history downtown with over 4,000 people. Yeah, over 4,000 people came, and many of the students you see here today, an amazing peaceful demonstration after the murder of George Floyd. So we are proud of our students here at Fresno State, and we are proud of you all and the work you're doing, and we're grateful. Grateful for you being here in Fresno, grateful for you being with us tonight. At this time, I'll turn it back over to Eric Payne to close out our program and reintroduce our guest artists.
Thank you so much. Let's give our moderator and our panel a final round of applause, please. Amazing. Thank you all for your travels to be with us today, and really giving us something to look forward to in the future as we continue to push these conversations. Again, Eric Payne, Executive Director of the Central Valley Urban Institute. We are getting ready to hold the line and turn up the volume on this conversation across our region. And so those that are interested in learning more about how they can participate in this work, please connect with me. And then I want to thank CMAC, our TV sponsor in the back. We've been live streaming all day today, all this evening. So thank you all for being the tech folks, because God knows I couldn't do it. Just don't have the technical know-how. But and then to our panelists who drove from Oakland and LA, and our homegrown heroes who are doing the work here locally, thank you. I want to recognize our student co-hosts today, the Black Students United. If your leadership will please stand up. Black Students United here at Fresno State, yes. And the NAACP, please stand up. NAACP representatives, both orgs, yes, stand up. All right, great. And please connect with them. They have a table in the back to learn more about the work that they're doing and how you can be an adult ally. Finally, I'm going to close out the show, and we're going to bring back up our poet, Teresa the Songbird. Come on up and please share as you close this out. Please connect with the panel at our reception downstairs. We have a lot of great food for you. It's going to be, as you exit, make the right, and then you'll see tables and food. Okay.
You so black. You so black, when you smile, the stars come out. You so black, when you born, the God come out black as night. Black when it's wrong and black when it's right. Black is pyramids in mathematics. Black is melanized in magic. Black is televised and in need of drastic black advancement. Black enhances, black with chances, black with privilege, black with pride, black on purpose. On the black hand side, black and beautiful. Black and blessed and highly favored, ain't we black and blessed? Black and so much more, black and nothing less. Black and educated, black and dangerous. I don't know if y'all have heard this, but those blacks with the education are the most dangerous. Because black is brilliant. Black is strong. Black is resilient. Black is song. Black is infinite, like hip-hop or space. Black is grace. Black is love. Black makes babies. Black babies grow up. Black is tough. Black is hard to do. Black is me. Black is you. Black is not something that we get to choose, but it is something that we get to cherish. It's something that we get to wear, and we get to rock this with honor. So yes, I'm black like my granddaddy and my great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmama. Back to the black first farmer of black soil and black seed. Black as you need, black as you breathe, black as you believe, black as you love. Black is all of the above. Black has always been enough. Black is that lift every voice and sing. Black is that letting your freedom ring and resound. Black is adjective, adverb, color, and noun. Black is crown. Black is clean. So to the black is all everlasting. To the black and passing. and to every shade of black in between, as a matter of fact. If your pupils or your eyelashes are black, because I really need every human being on the planet to feel applicable. Baby, you so black, your spirit transcends this physical. Your black is original. You so black. Oh, you so black! When you smile, the stars come out. Baby, you so black. When you're born, the God comes out. Thank you.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. So thank you, thank you. Again, Teresa the Songbird will have her merchandise in the back at our table if you're interested in supporting her. Again, she is Grammy nominated, NAACP Image Awards, man, I mean, like, just everything. She's just great, right? So we just want you to connect with her in the back. And please, again, our reception is downstairs. You will have to exit the building to get to the reception. Thank you. Have a good night.